The pain of betrayal is unlike any other. It doesn't just break you, it shatters you, leaving jagged pieces that cut from the inside long after the wound was made. I learned that lesson the hard way. My first wife, Julia, had destroyed me. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She had gutted my life with surgical precision, taking everything, my home, my dignity, my trust. When she left, she didn't just walk away. She walked away laughing, holding the hand of the man she had chosen over me. I told myself I had learned from my mistakes, that I would never again be so blind. I had rebuilt. I had remarried. My new wife, Sophia, was nothing like Julia, or so I believed. She was warm, kind, devoted. We had a 3-year-old daughter, and Sophia was pregnant with our second child. My world, once reduced to ashes, had blossomed again. But life has a cruel sense of irony. It started with a mistake, one I never should have made. I wasn't the type to check my wife's phone. I never wanted to be that kind of man, the one who lived in paranoia, always waiting for the past to repeat itself. But that night, as she slept beside me, her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. "Hurricane, I hope this is from me, right?" The words seared into my brain. They didn't just suggest betrayal. They screamed it. The air in the room thickened, my pulse hammering in my ears. Who was Hurricane? What did they mean? For a long time, I sat there staring at that message, unable to breathe, unable to think. My hands trembled, the weight of my past crashing into my present. I had promised myself I would never go through this again. But this time I wouldn't be the victim. This time, I would be the storm. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was unraveling, each thought tightening around my throat like a noose. The message from Hurricane repeated in my head, a cruel whisper I couldn't silence. I sat in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, my wife's phone still in my hands. She lay next to me, her breathing soft and even, oblivious to the fire she had ignited. I wanted to wake her up, shove the phone in her face, demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I took a breath and did what I never thought I would do. I unlocked her phone. The passcode was the same as always, our wedding anniversary. It almost made me laugh. How pathetic. How easy she had made it for me. The first thing I did was check the messages. There were no prior texts from Hurricane, as if she had deleted them after each exchange. But the name alone told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't a friend. It wasn't an innocent conversation. It was a secret. A betrayal. I moved to her photo gallery, scrolling through the images with steady hand, my heartbeat slow and measured. I was past the point of fear. Now I was hunting. Most of the photos were of our daughter, of family gatherings, of the life I thought we had built together. But then I saw it. A picture of her standing in front of a mirror in our bedroom, wearing a dress I had never seen before. The dress was tight, red, meant for someone who wanted to be noticed. She wasn't smiling the way she did in our family photos. This was something else, a different version of her, a version that didn't belong to me. The timestamp told me everything I needed to know. 2 weeks ago, a night when she had told me she was going out with friends, a night when I had stayed home, putting our daughter to bed, never once questioning her absence. I checked her call history next. One number stood out. Repeated calls, late at night, always deleted from her messages. I copied it down, my mind already working through the possibilities. I would find out who this Hurricane was, and then I would deal with my wife. But not yet. Rage is like fire. If you let it burn uncontrolled, it consumes everything, including yourself. I wasn't going to be reckless. I wasn't going to let emotions dictate my actions. I was going to be precise, cold, ruthless. I put her phone back exactly as I found it, then lay down beside her, my body rigid, my mind working through every detail. She stirred slightly in her sleep, shifting closer to me, unaware that the man lying next to her had changed. By morning, I would have a plan. By nightfall, she would know what it felt like to lose everything. Because this time, I wasn't going to be the one left in ruins. This time, I would be the executioner. Morning came with an eerie calm, the kind that settles over the ocean before a storm rips the sky apart. I watched Sophia move through the house, kissing her daughter on the forehead, humming softly as she made breakfast. She was beautiful, deceptive, a master of her role. I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through my phone while my mind worked through every detail. My plan wasn't fully formed yet, but I knew one thing for certain: I wouldn't confront her until I had everything. Proof. A strategy. A way to make her hurt. I checked the number I had copied from her call history. My first step was finding out who Hurricane was. A simple search led nowhere, but I had other ways. I reached out to a contact, an old friend from my less respectable days, a man who could dig up anything on anyone. "Give me a day," he said. "I'll find him." Him. I had already suspected, but hearing it confirmed was like a blade pressing against my ribs. Sophia sat across from me, oblivious to the war she had started. "You okay?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "You seem quiet." I smiled. "Just tired." She smiled back, and I studied her. Was she relieved? Anxious? Did she suspect anything? No. She was too comfortable. Too confident in her deception. She thought she was safe. I let the day play out like any other. I kissed my daughter goodbye when I dropped her off at daycare. I went to work, even managed to force small talk with my colleagues. But every moment, my mind remained on Sophia. And Hurricane. By the afternoon, my friend had results. A name, a face, a location. His real name was Anthony Delgado. Early 40s. A fitness trainer at a high-end gym across town. Married. 2 kids. Sophia had been seeing a married man. The irony nearly made me laugh. I found his social media easily. A carefully curated life. Photos with his family. Motivational posts about commitment and discipline. A lie wrapped in muscle and false wisdom. A man just like me. No, not like me. I wasn't the one sneaking around in the dark. I wasn't the one sending cryptic messages while lying beside my spouse. I wasn't the one who had turned my vows into a joke. But I would be the one to deliver justice. I didn't act right away. I spent the next few days gathering more information. I needed to know how deep this went. I placed a small GPS tracker in Sophia's car, discreet, undetectable. I installed monitoring software on her phone, something I had sworn I would never do to another person. But she had made me break that promise. And then I waited. 2 days later, she gave me what I needed. A notification popped up on my phone just after lunch. Sophia had driven across town, far from where she told me she was going. The GPS placed her at a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. I didn't react. I simply stood, walked to my car, and drove. By the time I got there, her car was already parked outside one of the rooms. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I just stood there watching. The door opened, and Hurricane stepped out. Anthony Delgado. Tall, muscular, handsome in a generic way. He stretched, looking around before checking his phone. A moment later, Sophia stepped out after him, her hair slightly disheveled, adjusting the sleeve of her blouse. She kissed him, and my world, the second life I had built from the ashes of my past, burned all over again. But this time, I didn't just watch it happen. This time, I would burn them too. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched. Sophia stood there, smiling up at him like he was her whole world. Like I didn't exist. Like our home, our daughter, the life we had built together, none of it mattered. She touched his arm, a light, familiar gesture. And then, as if mocking me, she laughed. Carefree. Happy. The sound twisted inside me, warping into something dark, something venomous. I had come here expecting confirmation. I had braced myself for impact. But nothing prepared me for the rage that flooded my veins in that moment. I wanted to walk up to them, to grab her by the wrist, tear her away from him, and demand to know how long she had been feeding me lies. I wanted to watch the smug confidence drain from his face as he realized his little secret had come knocking at his door. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about confrontation. This was about destruction. I turned away before they could see me, drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't blast the radio to drown out my thoughts. I let them fester, grow, take shape. By the time I stepped through the front door, my plan had solidified into something cold, precise, unforgiving. Sophia returned home that evening at her usual time, slipping seamlessly back into the role of devoted wife and mother. She kissed our daughter, smiled at me, asked how my day had been, as if nothing had happened. I played along. I wrapped my arms around her, let my fingers rest on the small swell of her stomach, our second child growing inside her, the child that might not even be mine. That thought alone nearly shattered my composure. I had to be sure. That night, after she had fallen asleep, I retrieved the small at-home paternity test kit I had purchased earlier that day, swabbed my own cheek, then carefully collected a sample from hers while she slept. I needed answers, and once I had them, she would never see me coming. The results took a few days, long, agonizing days where I barely slept, barely spoke. I didn't trust myself to. Every time Sophia laughed, every time she touched me, I wanted to recoil, to snap, but I had to wait. Then the email arrived. I opened it with a steady hand. Read the words slowly, deliberately. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Relief should have washed over me. It didn't. The betrayal remained. The infidelity remained. That child might be mine, but the woman carrying it was no longer my wife in my eyes. She was something else entirely. Something to be taught a lesson. I started with Hurricane. Anthony Delgado, a man who valued his reputation, his business, his family. I dug deeper, using every tool at my disposal. Hacked into his work email. Went through his messages, his transactions. And what I found, he had more than just Sophia. There were others. At least 3, judging by the conversations. Different women, different levels of attachment. He was a serial cheater, methodical in his deception, careful in his disposal of evidence, but not careful enough. I copied everything, compiled it neatly, and then I reached out to his wife. The message was simple. You don't know me, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Attached is everything you need to see. Check the timestamp, the locations. Compare them to his excuses. And then, just to ensure she understood exactly who had shattered her marriage, I included a picture. One I had taken outside the motel. Sophia and Anthony, locked in an embrace. The kiss that had sealed their fate. I hit send. Now, it was only a matter of time before the world I had set fire to started burning around them. But Sophia, she wasn't done suffering yet. Not even close. The storm came swiftly. By the next evening, the cracks had started to form. I knew the moment Sophia received the first message. I watched her from across the room as she checked her phone, her body stiffening, her breath catching. She looked up at me, forcing a smile. I need to step outside for a moment. I nodded, hiding my amusement. Everything okay? She hesitated. Yeah, just a friend. Lies. I waited exactly 1 minute before following her. She stood in the backyard, phone pressed to her ear, voice hushed but urgent. Anthony, what's happening? She sent me everything. How did she find out? A pause. No, my husband doesn't know. She stopped suddenly, glancing around. I stepped back into the shadows before she could see me. My heart pounded, not with panic, but with exhilaration. She was unraveling. Good. I let her finish her frantic conversation, then returned inside before she did. When she walked back in, her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she set her phone on the counter. Everything okay? I asked again, this time enjoying the way she flinched at my voice. She forced another smile, but I saw through it now. Yeah, just some drama with a friend. Drama. She had no idea what real drama was yet. Anthony Delgado's world crumbled faster than I expected. By morning, his wife had gone public. Social media exploded with posts, accusations, screenshots. His name was dragged through the mud. His reputation shattered overnight. His clients started pulling out. His gym's social media page was flooded with angry comments from people demanding refunds, boycotting his business. By noon, he had deleted all his accounts. By evening, his wife had kicked him out. And me? I went home, ate dinner with my wife and daughter, kissed Sophia on the cheek as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She just didn't know it yet. The next day, Sophia was restless, distracted. She barely touched her food, barely spoke. She kept checking her phone, each message making her more and more tense. She was afraid. Not of me. Not yet. But of the consequences. I let her stew in it. Let her paranoia grow. I knew what was coming next. She would want to cover her tracks, clean up the mess, make sure nothing led back to her. She didn't realize she was already caught. That night, I struck again. I walked into our bedroom, where she was sitting on the bed, staring blankly at her phone. "Everything okay?" I asked, masking the venom behind a soft voice. She looked up, startled. "Yeah," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just tired." I nodded, stepping closer. I was thinking. I let my voice trail off, let hesitation flicker across my face. She needed to believe I was vulnerable, that I was still blind. "What?" she asked, wary. "I've been so busy with work," I sighed. "I feel like we haven't had time for each other lately." Her eyes widened slightly. Oh, she hadn't expected that. She was preparing for a fight, for suspicion, not affection. I sat beside her, took her hand in mine. Her fingers were cold. "How about a weekend trip?" "Just us." Shock flickered across her face. She didn't know how to respond. "That sounds nice," she said finally. "I'll plan everything," I assured her. "All you have to do is relax." She nodded, but I saw the conflict in her eyes. She was guilty, panicked, unsure. She would say yes, because she needed to. Because rejecting me, now, after everything, would make her look suspicious. But the real reason I wanted this trip? To make sure she understood exactly who she had betrayed, and just how dangerous that mistake had been. The weekend trip was set. A cozy cabin, deep in the woods, secluded, quiet, far from the eyes of the world. Sophia didn't question it. She was too rattled, too eager to prove that everything was fine. I could see the war in her eyes, the way she fought to act normal, to suppress the paranoia creeping up her spine. She had no idea she was walking into her own execution. The drive up was uneventful. Sophia sat beside me, hands folded in her lap, stealing glances at me every so often. Was she trying to figure out if I knew? If I suspected? I let her wonder. The road stretched long and empty, winding through the dense forest. The farther we drove, the more isolated we became. There were no hotels, no gas stations, just endless trees and a sky that darkened with every passing mile. By the time we arrived, the sun had nearly set, casting deep orange streaks across the sky. The cabin stood alone, surrounded by towering pines. Perfect. Sophia stepped out of the car, hugging her coat tighter around herself. "It's a quiet," she murmured. I smiled. "Exactly what we need." She nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just us. Just us." We stepped inside, the air thick with pine and old wood. A fireplace sat in the corner, unlit. The place was simple, no TV, no Wi-Fi. Just silence. I locked the door behind us. Sophia didn't notice. Not yet. Dinner was normal. Forced, but normal. She ate, though not much. She laughed, though not fully. She was trying to pretend, trying to survive. I let the meal stretch on, let the tension grow. And when we were done, I poured us each a glass of wine. "Tell me something," I said, swirling the liquid in my glass. She looked up, her smile thin. "What?" "If you could change one thing about our marriage," I mused, "what would it be?" Her fingers tightened around her glass. "What kind of question is that?" I shrugged. "Just curious." She hesitated. I don't know. I think we let life get in the way sometimes. Work stress. We stopped focusing on us. Allah. I took a slow sip. "That's fair." Silence. Heavy, suffocating. Then I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. "What about trust?" She blinked. "What?" "Trust," I repeated. "Do you think we have it?" She swallowed. "Of course." I tilted my head. Even if one of us was hiding something. The color drained from her face. I set my glass down, watching her. Waiting. She shifted uncomfortably. "Ryan, what's this about?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Tossed it onto the table. "Press play." The recording began. Not a video, just audio. A conversation. Her conversation. With him. Anthony Delgado. Her eyes widened as her own voice filled the cabin. Laughing. Whispering. Making promises. Her hand flew to her mouth, horror dawning across her face. Ryan, I lifted a hand. Don't. She froze. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. The way her chest rose and fell in short, panicked breaths. The way her fingers trembled against the wood. You've been lying to me for months, I said calmly. Sneaking around. Deleting messages. Meeting him in motels. Tears welled in her eyes. I can explain. You think I need an explanation? I laughed. The sound was cold, empty. I know everything. Her breath hitched. Please, don't beg. My voice was sharp, slicing through the space between us. Not after what you've done. She was shaking now. Good. You lied to me, I continued. You disrespected our family. You risked everything for him. Her lips parted, but no words came. I stood, slow and deliberate. You thought you were careful. Thought I wouldn't notice. But I did. And I watched. And I waited. She swallowed hard. Waited for what? A slow smile crept onto my lips. To decide what I was going to do with you. Sophia's breathing turned shallow. She gripped the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. You're scaring me, she whispered. I tilted my head. Am I? Her eyes darted toward the door. Calculating. Foolish. I stepped forward, leaning close. Where do you think you're going to run, Sophia? I murmured. She inhaled sharply. I brought you here for a reason. Her body went rigid. And then, finally, she understood. This wasn't just a weekend getaway. This was a reckoning. And she wasn't walking away from it unscathed. Sophia bolted from the table. She ran for the door, her bare feet skidding across the wooden floor. Desperate. Clumsy. I didn't move. Not right away. I let her reach for the handle. Let her yank at it. Let realization sink into her bones when it wouldn't budge. She turned, her breath ragged, eyes wild. Ryan, please, she gasped. Whatever you think. I don't think. I cut her off. I know. I stepped forward, slow, deliberate. I know where you've been. I know what you've done. I gestured toward the untouched glass of wine she had left on the table. And I know that running won't save you. Her gaze flicked to the glass, then back to me. Fear painted her face. Good. She was finally beginning to grasp the situation. Her voice broke. I was going to tell you. I let out a quiet laugh. When? After the baby was born? Or after you ran off with him? She swallowed, pressing her back against the door. I never. Don't lie. She flinched at the force of my words. I took another step forward. You had everything, Sophia. A husband who loved you. A family. And you threw it away. She shook her head violently. No, I wasn't thinking. I tilted my head. Oh, but you were. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folder. Tossed it onto the table between us. Go on, I murmured. Open it. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she hesitated. Her hand shook as she reached for it, flipping it open. Her breath caught. Inside were printed messages. Screenshots. Photos. Her motel visits. Bank statements proving she had used our shared credit card to fund her affair. The truth laid bare. I watched as her body sagged, as the weight of her own betrayal crushed her. She choked. I didn't mean for it to. I don't care, I said coldly. It's already done. She looked up at me, eyes red, voice trembling. What are you going to do? I leaned in, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm going to take everything from you. Sophia cried for hours. She pleaded, begged, promised she would make things right. I didn't listen. I let her sit in her own misery while I planned the final blow. By the time morning came, she was quiet, hollow, defeated, perfect. I handed her my phone. Read, I said simply. She took it with shaking hands, looked down at the screen. Her face paled. It was an email. One I had sent late last night. To her parents. To her sister. To her closest friends. I had told them everything. The affair, the lies, the betrayal, and I had attached evidence. No, she whimpered. Ryan, no, please. I snatched the phone back. Too late. A sob tore from her throat. I didn't care. You humiliated me, I said, my voice calm. I'm simply returning the favor. She crumpled to the floor, hands over her face. What about Emily? She whispered. My body went rigid. Emily, our daughter, the only innocent soul in all of this. I took a breath, pushing the thought aside. Emily will be fine. My voice softened just a fraction. Because she won't grow up in a house built on lies. Sophia shook her head, gripping my leg like I was her last hope. You can't do this. Please, Ryan, think about our baby. I pulled away. I had thought about the baby. I had thought about everything. And she was about to see just how merciless I could be. The divorce papers were ready by the time we returned home. I handed them to her the moment we walked through the door. She barely looked at them. Ryan, don't do this. I scoffed. You already did this. Her hand rested on her stomach. We're having a child. I met her gaze, ice in my veins. I'm having a child. You're having consequences. Tears streamed down her face, but I had no sympathy left to give. I pointed at the papers. Sign them. She hesitated. I need time. I leaned in, voice dripping with venom. Take too long, and I'll make sure you never see Emily again. That did it. With shaking hand, she picked up the pen. And sign away everything. The last piece of my revenge fell into place 3 weeks later. Sophia had moved into a small apartment, alone, abandoned by nearly everyone. Anthony had tried to fix his own marriage, but his wife had taken their kids and left him with nothing. They deserved it. As for me, I had Emily, full custody, a new home, fresh start. The scars would never fully heal, but the weight of betrayal no longer sat on my chest. Sophia called once, late at night. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message. I miss you. I miss us. I still love you. I deleted it. She was nothing to me now. Nothing but a mistake I would never make again. And as I held Emily close that night, listening to her soft breathing, I knew one thing for certain. I had won.